It is such an honor for me to be here today. I have to tell you that about 10 years before John Kelly walked along that path that connected the campuses back in the early days of his time here, about 10 years before that, I used to walk that path. I used to come up here every year for at least one weekend for what was one of the premier high school debate tournaments in New York State. And I'd bring my team up here, and they'd see a college, these kids that didn't really dream of going to college. And this place gave them something for which they could aim. We knew then that this was a learning village and that this was something special. I have to say, over the last 12 years, I've been reacquainted with Union because of your extraordinary president and my dear friend, himself a role model of a balance of life that's extraordinary. He got me reinterested in this place when he became president here. I began to follow the extraordinary education that goes on here. I even, as you can tell, I'm a serious sports fan. Anybody that writes a book about baseball as religion takes sports seriously. I confess I was never really drawn to hockey, but through Stephen, I became a Union hockey fan right through 2014 and up until today. But for all the love that I had for this place from those early days with my students and seeing it over this last decade or so, I have to say my greatest admiration grew as I spent yesterday here with you and as I went through the baccalaureate services and I heard those three extraordinary speakers. I can't wait to hear Matt today. And to hear a faculty member speak with love of a place. It became clear to me that these words, family and home, mean something real here, and that's something that you will always take with you. Now, I want the class of 2017 to join me in doing something, if you would. If you would all just take 1 minute and stand. It's good to get a break from the heat anyway. Just stand and turn around and look back. You're not going to be able to see them, but just kind of in your mind's eye, see the loved ones that are here with you today. And let's give them a round of applause for bringing you to this point. God bless them. Now you can sit down, because I'm supposed to give an address. And be better if you looked at me. But I want you to draw something as I start my address. I'm going to knit together a few stories and try to draw a moral from them. But I want you to, as you've had that moment of connecting with your loved ones, I want you to understand something about what brings you here today that may not have occurred to you before. You won a lottery, and you didn't even buy the ticket that got you into it. You are among the luckiest people in the world because you were born smart. You all have sizzling talent. You had nothing to do with that. You get that? You could have been born dumb. But you were born smart. And that's not just a casual observation. Wherever you came from, and you come from all different places, wonderfully different places, and you've learned the joy and spectacular elevation of being with people from different places, but you're all smart. And that imposes on you a duty, a real duty, to make sure you use that gift well that you were just handed. And you've done okay so far. You know, you've all done okay. And I say that as a person that at my graduation sat there armed with a mighty 2.1 grade point average. So parents, rest assured, every single one of them had higher grades than me. I guarantee it. My son took my college transcript to college with him and would read me my grades first every semester before he read his own. But you've got to use that intelligence well. You've got to use it like the extraordinary scientists with whom I'm honored to be honored today by this place. So here are a couple of stories just to knit them together quickly for you. And I'm going to take off from Stephen's reference to this man, Charlie. Now, graduation speeches are not very memorable, but you're going to remember Charlie. Okay, or just remember that name, and every now and then, let that name come to you as a voice that will call you to certain kind of aphorisms and Charlie stories I'm going to give you. Now, first of all, you got to picture this guy as he was. And you'll all be able maybe to associate some of these things with great teachers you've had here at Union. For me, this guy was the most formative teacher I ever had, and I encountered him as a 12-year-old as I entered high school, and he taught me for all 4 years of high school. But he looked, you all know Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know the guy in the box, Colonel Sanders? That's the way Charlie looked at the age of 30. Okay, he was that size, and he had prematurely white hair. And someone once said about Charlie, he had the body, you won't know the reference, he said he had the body of Orson Welles, but that big body, he had the voice of James Earl Jones, and he had the soul of St. Francis of Assisi. And that was Charlie, who never married, who just loved his teaching, and anything that I have accomplished simply as his disciple. I've done nothing more than take his ideas and work them out on a stage ever larger and larger. Now, here's the first Charlie lesson. I've never forgotten it. For some reason, they took 12 of us. We don't know how we were chosen, but they took 12 of us. This is in the 1950s. Okay, this is before the Dodgers had won the World Series. Okay, so this is in 1955, before the World Series. And they took 12 of us, and they gave us from 9 to 10 in the morning, 5 days a week, for all 4 years, a course they just called Charlie, because they didn't know what to call it. And we had no idea what this course was. We didn't get to choose our courses. They were assigned to us. And we walked in and didn't know that we were going to go through a 4-year journey where he simultaneously taught us the history of art, music, history, and literature before anybody ever thought of the word interdisciplinary, starting with the cave paintings and running right up to the Korean War. It was an amazing course. But when he walked in, that man I've just described to you, to the first class, and looked out at us, we had no idea what it was going to be about. And this was his first lesson. And I give it to you because the single most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, that you're going to do in your life is the choice of your life partner. And Charlie looked out at us and said, it was all boys school. Boys, on the first date, find out her IQ. Beauty fades, but the need for conversation never will. Now, that's not saying to you, marry someone from Union, because they're all smart. But whatever your choice of a life partner is, never forget that lesson. But he then began to take us through the various centuries. I remember when he got to the Old Kingdom in Egypt, and he had slides of the pyramids at Giza on the wall. And we had listened to music from the time, and we had read the Shakespearean play, and we had studied the history. And he knew we were all poor boys from, you can probably tell, Brooklyn. And he said to us as he pointed at the pyramids at Giza, boys, you will never see these pyramids because you can't drive to them. Because he knew we couldn't afford planes or boats. We could only go places we could drive. But he said, boys, there are pyramids south of here that were built by a great civilization. You just haven't heard of them because, excuse my language, I'm quoting him, the goddamn British didn't rob these pyramids for their museums. So there he was talking about ethnocentrism and Eurocentrism way back then. And didn't we get in our cars and drive down to see the pyramid of Teotihuacan? And didn't I take my children back? And didn't I take my grandchildren back? And then finally I once was able to see the pyramids of Giza because of the miracle of trying. But he had a phrase that he used to capture that. He said, boys, and this is the second thing I want you to remember after that first, which is find out the IQ. But the second is play another octave of the piano, boys. Play another octave of the piano. If there's notes you haven't touched, reach out and touch them. If there's a food you haven't tasted, if there's a place you can get to you haven't been, if there's a book you haven't read, if there's a music you haven't heard, if there's the kind of person you've never met before, reach out and touch them. You'll find it's the glory of creation. Play another octave of the piano, and as long as it's legal and moral, as long as it's legal and moral, and it's not one of the 4 things that your parents get peremptorily to just say, please don't do this. They get to pick 4 that are legal and moral and say, please don't do skydiving. Okay, and then you don't do skydiving, just because parents deserve to be happy. Okay, but follow it through. Most of all, follow it through in the people that you embrace. Look for the people that are most different from you. And then he taught us not to be afraid to fail. I remember the time we read the great poem by Eugene O'Neill. Let those who stop at mere success and do not press on to glorious failure be condemned as the spiritual middle class. Let them die with their simple dreams. You're smart. You can fail and come back. Don't be afraid of it. Go for it. Finally, my wife and I and our kids took care of Charlie during the closing years of his life. He didn't have a family, and we were there for him. And I persuaded the Jesuits who ran this high school to make Charlie the first non-Jesuit they took in their senior care facility up at my alma mater, Fordham. And I would go up and visit him every weekend when I was in town. And on one of the last weekends I visited him, I was wheeling him around a campus, a beautiful campus like this, and we were in something that I guess it would be like your Jackson Garden. Beautiful flowers. And he asked me to stop, and he said, John, I want to invite you to a practice that I began when I was a teenager. I decided that no one of my limited talent could commit an offense that was worthy of God's attention. So I stopped confessing sins of commission, and I began to confess only sins of omission. These will be the great sins of your life. If you fail to embrace someone you could embrace, if you pass on helping someone whose life you could make better, with your enormous talent, beware, Charlie would say, sins of omission. Look, you leave here with this family. You leave here as communitarians, naturally. You've built a wonderful spirit here. You leave here as what I call possibilitarians. You know, you believe with that talent that you can do things that are possible. Use union as the North Star. as you go through life. Use the memories, use the lessons, use the network, but remember that under the law of Minerva, we are all brothers and sisters. God bless you. Congratulations. I'm honored to be back here, and most of all, to be part of the magnificent class of 2017. Thank you.